Joseph's mind was never simple. From the earliest days in Canaan, when my dreams of stars, sheaves, and the subtle hierarchy of family began to form, I understood that perception and consciousness were intertwined with destiny and danger. My psychology was shaped first by intimacy and betrayal, the warmth of family, the sting of envy, the inexplicable alchemy of love turning to resentment. Even as a boy, I sensed the weight of awareness, the sense that my mind observed more than it revealed, that my heart felt more than it displayed. To be a favored son is to be watched, to be envied, and to be misunderstood. From the psychological perspective, favoritism creates both identity and vulnerability. I was both elevated and isolated, praised and resented, positioned to succeed yet positioned to fail by those closest to me. My dreams, vivid and precise, were reflections not only of divine truth but of my mind's natural inclination toward pattern recognition, abstraction, and projection. I perceived structures, hierarchies, and futures in a way that made ordinary interactions fraught with both insight and peril. Envy is a subtle, corrosive force. I learned it early. My brother's resentment was not merely emotional, it was strategic. The psychology of envy is a mix of fear, projection, and desire. Fear of displacement, projection of inadequacy, and desire for status or validation. I perceived it before they acted, understood it before they articulated it, yet could not prevent it. Their choice to sell me into slavery was a profound psychological event. Betrayal by blood, exile by design, and a lesson in the unpredictability of human motivation. The mind of Joseph had to adapt quickly, to navigate trauma, to transform shock into observation, and observation into strategic understanding. Slavery, stripped of agency, demands psychological resilience of the highest order. In Egypt, in the house of Potiphar, I encountered the intersection of social hierarchy, power dynamics, and moral testing. The mind under constraint must negotiate influence without authority, respect without fearlessness, and principle without exposure. I realized that integrity was both a shield and a lens. It protected the soul even as it revealed the character of those around me. The temptation posed by Potiphar's wife was not merely sexual, it was cognitive, emotional, and ethical. My psychology in that moment demanded compartmentalization of desire, prioritization of principle, and anticipation of consequence. The human mind, under temptation, experiences a tension between instinct and reflection, desire and morality, fear and courage. To navigate this tension requires both foresight and moral clarity, the capacity to observe oneself with dispassionate honesty while acting decisively in alignment with ethical truth. Imprisonment was a crucible. Removed from the familiar structures of home and household, isolated and vulnerable, my mind entered a state where reflection, interpretation, and resilience became central to survival. The prison was a laboratory of thought, dreams interpreted, hierarchies analyzed, human behavior observed. I began to recognize patterns of trust and deceit, of ambition and fear, of hope and despair. The psychology of confinement is subtle. It fosters both despair and insight, both the temptation to surrender and the opportunity for extraordinary cognitive and moral development. Dream interpretation became a defining feature of my cognitive life. The cupbearer, the baker, Pharaoh, all brought narratives of anxiety, desire, and uncertainty into the private theater of my mind. To interpret a dream is to bridge cognition and empathy, observation and insight. Dreams reveal the subconscious, the anxieties of the self and society, and the encoded language of desire and fear. My mind developed the capacity to synthesize symbolism, analyze emotion, and articulate insight in ways that were both practical and ethically aligned. Interpretation is never merely technical. It is relational, moral, and strategic. Each dream I decoded was a test of psychological acuity, moral consistency, and emotional resonance. The psychology of patience underlies every narrative in my life. From betrayal to slavery to imprisonment, the mind faces repeated shocks to expectation. Psychological endurance requires the capacity to integrate suffering without bitterness, to perceive opportunity within adversity, to maintain identity amidst constant flux. My faith was the anchor of this endurance, but it was active, not passive. It required mental rehearsal, reflection, and the cultivation of a moral imagination capable of envisioning a future aligned with principle and hope. Power and influence arrived gradually, not as entitlement but as consequence of observation, insight, and moral consistency. In Pharaoh's court, the mind operates on multiple planes: administrative intelligence, political calculation, relational discernment, and ethical negotiation. To advise a ruler is to balance prediction with prudence, insight with diplomacy, honesty with tact, My psychological architecture evolved to integrate these dimensions, creating a capacity for strategic foresight, ethical influence, and relational acuity. The human mind, when tested under extreme social complexity, develops a refined sensitivity to motive, outcome, and consequence. Forgiveness, perhaps, is the pinnacle of psychological maturity in my narrative. To confront my brothers years later, to see their fear, guilt, and confusion, and to respond not with vengeance but with guidance and reconciliation, requires profound integration of cognitive, emotional, and moral faculties. Forgiveness is not weakness. It is complex cognitive labor. It involves regulation of emotion, recalibration of trust, recognition of human limitation, and the prioritization of relational and ethical outcome over immediate gratification. The mind capable of forgiveness navigates both memory and projection, harm and potential, resentment and restoration. Joseph's psychology exemplifies long-term planning and cognitive temporal depth. Every decision, whether to interpret a dream, advise a ruler, manage famine, or forgive, requires awareness of immediate impact and distant consequence. Strategic patience, moral foresight, and anticipatory cognition are central. The human mind, when aligned with ethical principle and reflective insight, can convert even adversity into leverage, chaos into order, and marginalization into influence. The relational dimension of my mind evolved through trials. Trust had to be calibrated, empathy exercised carefully, and influence applied judiciously. The psychology of relational intelligence, understanding motive, reading affect, interpreting intention, and balancing influence, becomes vital when survival, ethics, and social cohesion intersect. I learned that the mind must navigate not only personal risk, but the cascading consequences of action within family, society, and polity. Resilience is inseparable from hope. Psychological endurance is underpinned by the capacity to maintain vision when immediate circumstances suggest despair. In prison, in alien courts, in moments of betrayal, the mind sustains itself not merely through rational calculation, but through a combination of faith, imagination, and emotional regulation. The human mind can survive nearly any circumstance if it can anticipate meaning, perceive potential, and integrate suffering into narrative coherence. Temptation, betrayal, authority, exile, imprisonment, reconciliation. Each stage of life created layers of cognitive, moral, and emotional sophistication. The psychology of Joseph is a model of integrative development. Observation sharpened by adversity, moral clarity enhanced by challenge, relational insight informed by betrayal, strategic intelligence tempered by ethics, patience fortified by faith. The interplay of these dimensions produces a mind capable of navigating extreme complexity with effectiveness and integrity. Dreams continued to shape consciousness, not merely as predictive tools but as vehicles of moral and psychological insight. The pharaoh's dreams of cows and grain, interpreted and applied, illustrate the mind's capacity to translate symbolic insight into practical action. Dreams are the interface of subconscious perception and conscious strategy, reflecting not only personal insight but broader systemic understanding. The human mind, when disciplined, can utilize intuition, pattern recognition, and symbolic comprehension to shape real-world outcomes. The integration of spirituality and cognition is central to the psychological profile. Faith is not passive assent, but active engagement with principle, perception, and strategy. The alignment of inner conviction with external action creates coherence, resilience, and authority. Psychological health in extreme conditions requires integration. Cognition, emotion, morality, and faith must function in concert. Disjunction among these domains produces internal conflict, stress, and ethical erosion. Integration produces clarity, endurance, and insight. Even in positions of power, vigilance remains necessary. Human psychology in hierarchy is complex. Envy, ambition, insecurity, and projection circulate invisibly. Influence is inseparable from the understanding of these dynamics and the capacity to navigate them ethically. Strategic empathy, moral clarity, and situational awareness define effectiveness in high-stakes social environments. The mind must continuously calibrate perception, anticipate consequence, and exercise moral judgment in relational and systemic contexts. The narrative arc of Joseph demonstrates temporal patience, the psychology of delayed gratification, strategic endurance, and moral constancy. To survive and thrive ethically in a volatile environment requires the mind to suspend immediate reward, anticipate future consequence, and maintain principle under duress. The ability to perceive long-term outcomes without sacrificing ethical clarity defines advanced psychological resilience. Forgiveness and reconciliation are not merely moral acts, but complex psychological achievements. The mind must integrate memory, anticipate consequence, regulate emotion, and prioritize relational repair over retribution. Such acts require the highest form of cognitive emotional synthesis, the capacity to understand harm, anticipate human behavior, and act in alignment with principle while exercising strategic patience and relational discernment. Joseph's psychology is also defined by integrative problem-solving. Famine management, resource allocation, and governance required synthesis of empirical observation, symbolic insight, ethical principle, and strategic foresight. The mind capable of integrating multiple domains of cognition, ethics, and relational intelligence is able to act decisively, adaptively, and morally under conditions of extreme uncertainty. Ultimately, Joseph's mind embodies the integration of adversity, insight, moral principle, relational acuity, and spiritual attunement. Betrayal, temptation, exile, imprisonment, authority, reconciliation, each shaped cognitive and emotional sophistication. Dreams, reflection, observation, and faith created a psychological architecture capable of enduring trauma, influencing society, exercising moral judgment, and fostering relational integrity. The psychology of Joseph illustrates that human cognition is most refined under conditions of ethical and existential challenge. The interplay of observation, reflection, moral principle, relational sensitivity, and strategic foresight produces a mind capable of navigating complexity without ethical erosion. Resilience, patience, foresight, and forgiveness emerge not in isolation but in interaction, integrally shaped by circumstance, adversity, and spiritual alignment. Joseph demonstrates that the human mind, when aligned with principle and cultivated under adversity, can transform betrayal into insight, adversity into influence, isolation into vision, and challenge into ethical power. Psychological maturity is not simply surviving circumstance, but integrating cognition, emotion, morality, and spirituality into a coherent, resilient, and effective architecture. In the final analysis, the mind of Joseph reflects the synthesis of trauma, insight, principle, patience, foresight, relational intelligence, and faith. It demonstrates the human capacity to endure, interpret, and act with clarity and ethical purpose. His psychology offers a template for resilience, moral reasoning, strategic intelligence, and integrative consciousness in the face of betrayal, temptation, exile, and authority. The human mind, disciplined and principled, can transform adversity into opportunity, complexity into insight, and ethical conviction into practical influence.